Hopefully, I don't dox myself by writing this, but I'm a graffiti artist, or as some might see it, a delinquent. I'm fine with either title. Point is, I like to spray paint, and I'm decent with a can in my hand. The tagging community is atrocious. People are unfriendly, and there's no respect between artists. Because of this, I've adopted a much more inconspicuous routine. I like tagging up quieter spots where my art likely won't be seen by other artists or the general public. Old train lines are usually a good bet since the train cars are endless, and new trains get decommissioned and left to rot on them all the time. My friend Paul likes to come with me when I tag up, even though he's not big into the whole thing himself. I welcome the company. Some people don't understand the importance of a good friend, and I think that's sad. Most of my other friends don't seem to respect my time or interests as much as he seems to. Paul and I found ourselves smoking on some nameless set of old tracks I found earlier that day on Google Maps. I'm not a big stoner myself, but he smokes a lot of weed, so I often indulge to match his vibe. It wasn't that late, maybe a little past 10 p.m. We finished a J and talked as we walked alongside the old rusty freight train. Oddly enough, there wasn't a single tag on the entire train. It must have been recently moved here. I thought excitedly that I'd get first dibs on such a good surface. I tossed Paul a can for him to mess around with, and I started doing my own thing. About 5 minutes later, I finished my first tag. I admired it for a bit before moving to the next car, then the next. About 15 minutes and 2 paint cans later, I had 3 decent tags up adjacent to one another, and I was pretty proud of myself for how they looked in combination with each other. Sorry in advance if this offends anyone, but I tend to discard my empty cans whenever they go dry. So, I flung them back the way we had come, enjoying the satisfying clattering sound a ball bearing makes when bouncing around the inside of an empty can. I then caught up with Paul, who had seemingly rolled and lit another joint, neglecting the paint I had given him. For context, the reason I'm not a big stoner is because I started getting unbearable anxiety highs much more frequently, maybe 90% of the time. In hindsight, smoking 2 Js with Paul was a borderline detrimental decision. After all, we were doing something illegal, which was already pretty anxiety-inducing. I smoked the second joint anyway, confident that I'd be okay. As soon as the final sparks floated off the J, that's when we heard it. A muffled clang from somewhere behind us rang out into the night. The two of us froze and stared into the darkness. I could feel droplets of sweat forming around my neck as adrenaline began coursing through me. I couldn't tell if the sound had come from outside of the train or from inside one of the cars. It was hard to tell which option was worse. We waited for a full minute in silence, and nothing. That's when I whipped out my phone and recorded this video. Bro, what the was this? No way, bro. You heard that? I heard that. What the, boy? Whoever made that noise picked up one of my empty paint cans and threw it at us before chasing and shouting at us. You can't really see the paint can in the video, but I swear to you that's what the first sound was. As we frantically made our escape, whoever was behind us yelled, "You better not trip, boy." A few seconds later, an actual gunshot sounded off behind us, almost causing Paul to trip and fall. It startled me so much that my finger slipped off the record button on Snapchat, and the video cut out. We bolted down the tracks until they intersected a main road and didn't stop running until we were a safe distance away. I don't think I've ever been more terrified in my entire life. It didn't help that I was stoned out of my mind. My hands were literally shaking, and so were Paul's. We found our way back to the car and drove home in silence. What was I supposed to do? call the police. I was literally breaking the law. That wasn't an option. The story doesn't end there, though. I actually went back to those tracks a few weeks later, but this time during the day and equipped with my trusty Glock 17. To my surprise, the train was still there. Despite that, there was a pretty glaring difference this time around. In the 3 spots where my tags had previously been were now ugly blotches of red paint. Someone had deliberately covered my work. Quietly, I kept investigating and eventually came to a train car with its door wide open. I took a look inside, and it was bizarre. The train car was completely empty except for a chair in the direct center and what looked like ropes and chains scattered about. Some of the ropes were wrapped around the legs of the chair, and others were just lying on the floor. The weirdest part was the smell, though. The whole car smelled like bleach. If you closed your eyes, you would have guessed you were in a cleaning supply closet. I can't overstate the smell, though. It literally smelled like the whole train car had been doused in bleach. I went to take a picture of the scene when I thought I heard a metal clang somewhere further down the train. I could have imagined it, but I wasn't taking any chances. That was enough for me. I was out of there as quickly as I had come. I've told so many people this story, and none of them could rationalize that psycho's actions in a way that makes sense. I doubt a homeless person would be able to get their hands on a gun, but I can't fathom why someone other than a homeless person would respond so aggressively. And why they decided to cover up my tags is another mystery. I think the most disturbing aspect of this whole thing was the chair in the middle of the train car. I really want to go back to those tracks just to take a picture of what I saw, but I haven't worked up the courage to. I have no idea if whoever was there that night was really shooting to kill us or just trying to scare us, but sometimes late at night, when it's just me and my thoughts, I can still hear that shot ringing in my ears. Me and my 3 friends were in New York around Christmas time. We didn't finally decide to leave until about maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. We got on the first train that we could catch, and as expected, it was empty. We were pretty sobered up by then. Then there was a sudden commotion in the next car over. We had peeped through the glass in between the cars and there were 2 hooded men, or maybe teenagers, standing obnoxiously close to a woman sitting in one of the seats who was screaming for help. I suggested that we go over and kick their asses, but as me and a buddy got a closer look, we saw they were armed with handguns. I pushed all my friends to get to the next car over, away from the armed men. I took a look back and saw one of the men pointing at us before starting to follow. We ran through at least 3 different cars with the men following us before the train finally stopped at the next station. We all booked it through the old station to the nearest place we could hide. I got separated from my friends, so I went to hide behind a garbage can. I could hear my chaser's shoes hitting the tiled floors, so I knew I had no time to find a better hiding spot. I peeked through the opening at the top of the bin. I could get a better look at them now. One was black, the other was Indian, and they were both really young looking. I was sure they were only trying to rob us until I heard one of them say, "If you find them, kill them." I hope you understand why I almost gave away my position in reaction to hearing this, with a gasp and almost pulling the garbage bin down with me as I returned to cover it. I consider it a miracle neither of them caught me. They left the area. I took notice that they didn't have their guns drawn at that moment. I ran in the opposite direction of the 2 and quickly caught my friends who were waving me over from behind a large pole. I took cover with them behind another pole not far from that one and we waited for as long as we thought necessary. The big shock to the story, though, was when we caught a glimpse of the woman from the train, who we thought was being threatened by the 2 men, walking over in the direction of the men and then calling something along the lines of, "Where are they? Don't tell me you didn't get them." The two men reappeared from beyond a corner, walking over to the woman. The rest of what they said was too low to pick up on. They walked back down the stairs to the platforms and, as we could guess, waited for another train to run their trap again. At the very least, we called the police and reported what was going on, but I have no idea if they were ever caught. This is narrated from the perspective of a female. This happened a few years ago in Rome, Italy. I was walking alone along the street that leads to the train station. It was around 2 p.m. on a working day, so almost practically no one was around. There were not many shops either on that street, and the few that existed were closed. A man was walking in my same direction just a few meters ahead of me. Casually, he turned back and noticed me. It was one of those instinctive reactions that you cannot conceal. His face said it all. He was roughly 6 foot tall and well built, not exactly the body structure you would like to see such a face on. His eyes openly said, "I've been to jail and I'm highly likely to go back again." He went along his way ahead of me and then turned again a couple more times, slowing down his pace. In a few moments, the situation was reversed. I was walking in front of him now. I didn't turn around, it was useless, I knew he was following me. I didn't hurry up, I just pretended I didn't notice him. I was listening to the radio on my smartphone with earbuds in and just simply kept on doing it. But you can imagine just how much I was panicking on the inside, all alone on the street with a 6-foot-tall criminal walking after me. I kept walking, struggling to the very last bit of my soul, acting as if nothing was happening, while desperately searching for an escape out of the situation. Then, after a few more minutes like this, I saw two men talking vivaciously outside of their shop. I seized the occasion and stopped right after them, pretending to scroll up and down on my phone. With the tail of my eye, though, I kept glancing beyond the two men, and I was right because after a few moments I saw him stretching his neck trying to spot me. He saw I had stopped and he was leaning against the wall near the two other men. He then turned back and went away. I'm pretty sure that I must have had a guardian angel that day who sent those two men and placed them at the right time and right place. Nothing else happened, but only because I was extremely lucky. To all the ladies out there, never take for granted that you're safe just because you're in broad daylight. And never give in to fear. As I write this, it's early July. This story took place at the beginning of summer. I usually try to hang around my college town or travel to Europe in the summer as a way to avoid going home, but that wasn't a possibility this time around. I found myself reluctantly returning home at the beginning of the summer. I just had to make it through 1 week, and then I'd be on a plane to Germany. I didn't really feel like seeing any of my old friends, but I wasn't too keen on staying home either. So, I found myself waking up early and spending my entire days hiking, watching movies, or even just driving around aimlessly. It was my last day home. I was getting bored of the stuff I had been doing and wanted to do something a little more exciting. My friends and I used to train hop, one of the many unruly activities that I had since cut out of my life. I decided, what the hell, and drove to a secluded set of tracks I knew about. Freight trains always passed through here, so I knew there would be many options. The tracks were surrounded by trees and various flora, part of the reason I had chosen them. The last thing I needed was to be caught for doing an illegal activity after having been clean for so many years. I parked my car and made my way over to the tracks. Let me describe the layout so it's easy to understand. This specific set of tracks ran through the trees for a while before entering a tunnel. There was a very small clearing on the other side of the tunnel and then a massive bridge over the water. My friends and I used to ride the train all the way across the bridge, but since it was just me, I would have no way of getting back to my car unless I felt like walking 10 miles. So, I decided that I'd hop on the train, take it through the tunnel, hop off, and get a peaceful walk back to my car. I walked along the tracks and waited for a train to pass. It was probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Finally, after about 10 minutes of walking, I started to feel the familiar vibration in the rails. I quickly ran to the side and tried my best to stay out of sight. Usually, as far as I know, freight train conductors didn't care enough to report people walking along the tracks, but I didn't want to take any chances. The train passed, and I waited for a good number of cars to go by before emerging from my hiding spot. I picked a car that looked easily attainable and began jogging alongside the train like I had done 100 times before. Once I was confident enough, I grabbed hold of the ladder and swung myself up. It was pretty easy, the train wasn't traveling very quickly. As my part of the train was about to enter the tunnel, I saw a strange flash of light from up ahead. I assumed it was a spark from the train or something, but truth be told, I had never seen anything like it before. I hoped there wasn't an errant wire or something dangerous in the tunnel, but it was too late to hop off. The train started picking up speed since the tunnel was perfectly straight, and I closed my eyes as the adrenaline rush started coming on. Just then, I felt a hand reach out from the darkness and literally grab my leg. I lost my footing and nearly slipped, but my hands were firmly gripping the train. I screamed and kicked, but the train sped by before I could make contact with anything. Before I could even comprehend what just happened, I felt another hand slap against my leg. I screamed again before scrambling up the ladder, hopefully out of reach. My heart was racing. What the hell just happened? The train exited the tunnel, and I hopped off without thinking. I waited for the train to completely pass and watched it chug over the bridge. I remember pacing back and forth in the little clearing, thinking about what just happened. Like, were there really people in the tunnel, and what could they possibly be doing there? Why the hell would they try to drag me down? All these thoughts and more were racing through my mind when a stark realization struck me in the face. The only way back to my car was through the tunnel. There was absolutely no chance in hell I was walking back through that tunnel with those people in there, especially since they'd be able to see my silhouette and I'd be walking through darkness. I sat on the ground for what felt like forever. There was no other option. I couldn't walk across the bridge without risking my life. A train could come along at any second, and the bridge was too long. I considered calling someone to come rescue me, but I wasn't even sure if they'd be able to do anything. Police weren't an option. I was breaking the law just being here. I had no choice. I picked up a rock and started making my way through the tunnel. There were 2 people in there, which I knew for a fact, but there could have been more. I had no idea. I got about halfway to the point where I felt the second set of hands when I heard something. A faint click was coming from somewhere in the tunnel. It sounded like a human clicking their tongue, but it could have been made by a machine. It was honestly hard to tell. I froze and thought to myself, continuing to walk this tunnel was a death sentence. I felt a rush of confidence and pulled out my phone. "You better stay back, or I'll shoot," I threatened, my words echoing off the tunnel walls. There was a moment of silence. The clicking stopped as quickly as it had begun. I was obviously bluffing about having a gun, but I figured it was better to bluff than just walk in silence. I then pulled up a video on YouTube of gunshot sound effects, turned up my phone's volume, and played it. It was honestly louder than I was expecting, and with the echo of the tunnel, I prayed to God that whoever was in there bought it. Without waiting another second, I sprinted full speed into the darkness, bracing myself for a fight. I didn't stop running until I had reached the other side. By some miracle, no one tried to grab me. After making it out of the tunnel, I looked back. There was another flash from deep in the tunnel. This time, though, it subsided long enough for me to clearly see two silhouettes standing on the tracks facing me. That was it for me. I turned to leave, but as I was jogging away, the nastiest screech I've ever heard emanated from the tunnel. It sounded barbaric, definitely human, but far from normal. I don't plan on ever train hopping again. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.